Tonight, the ultimate betrayal of our fallen soldiers.
Mark gave his very best on the battlefield, willingly stood up in the direct line of fire 3 times that day.
A mother whose son died fighting for Ramadi is sickened that the city is now controlled by ISIS. She'll be here to share her very personal story, plus reaction from Colonel Oliver North and Charles Krauthammer. And new documents show Hillary Clinton did, in fact, use a second secret email account while at the State Department. Mark Stein tonight is here with reaction.
I should have made additional disclosures on air when we covered the foundation.
Plus, is George Stephanopoulos' reported $105 million contract preventing him from being punished by ABC News? Ann Coulter is here tonight to weigh in.
In some communities, that sense of unfairness and powerlessness has contributed to dysfunction.
And Obama and his buddy Jay-Z bash the country that's given them every opportunity. Tonight, Michelle Malkin will respond. That and Jeff Foxworthy stops by our studios. Hannity starts right here, right now.
Welcome to Hannity Tonight. The Obama administration continues to betray our fallen troops who died fighting in Iraq. They do nothing while ISIS continues to capture key cities that they won. Now, here's how White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest described the situation earlier today. Listen to this.
As with any military effort, there will be days of progress, and there are going to be periods of setback. And again, that's something the president said back in October, and I think that over the course of the last 4 or 5 days, we've seen all of this.
Would you say that overall the strategy has been a success?
Well, John, yeah, I mean, overall, yes. Are we going to light our hair on fire every time that there is a setback?
Light our hair on fire every time there's a setback? This is not the first time the administration has dismissed Ramadi's importance. You may remember this.
The city itself is, it's not symbolic in any way. It's not been declared, part of the caliphate on one hand or central to the future of Iraq. But we want to get it back. I mean, the issue here is not brick and mortar. It's about defeating ISIL. So, as I said, I would much rather that Ramadi not fall, but it won't be the end of a campaign should it fall.
Now, General Dempsey later took back those comments, but that's only after the mother of the first Navy SEAL to die in Iraq demanded an apology. Joining me now are the mother of that fallen SEAL, the founder of the President of America's Mighty Warriors, Debbie Lee is with us, whose son Mark, he made the ultimate sacrifice in Ramadi. And former Navy SEAL Leif Babin is with us, who also fought alongside of Mark. Thank you both for being with us. Ms. Lee, first of all, I'm sorry about the loss of your son. You see that, first it was Tikrit that later got back in the right hands, Fallujah, Mosul, Ramadi, where your son died. You watch these cities go, and then we hear press secretary, we can't light our hair on fire every time we have a setback. What is your reaction to that?
First they were saying there was no symbolic if it did fall. Then they watched as the comments from General Dempsey, and now that it's falling, they're making up excuses. We have blood on that soil. My son's blood is on that soil. So many others have sacrificed greatly for that area. And it just shows that there's things we could be doing differently there. There's tactics that could be employed that we could make a difference over there. And now they're only emblazoned to go further and go into Baghdad and take that area as well.
Well, Ms. Lee, we played this last night. The president, when he pulled out, said, oh, everything is great, everything's going to be fine. And obviously his strategy is not working. George Bush warned about this. Let me remind everybody what he said in 2007 would happen if we pulled out too early. Here was his prediction.
Begin withdrawing before our commanders tell us we are ready would be dangerous for Iraq, for the region, and for the United States. It would mean surrendering the future of Iraq to al-Qaeda. It would mean that we'd be risking mass killings on a horrific scale. It would mean we'd allow the terrorists to establish a safe haven in Iraq to replace the one they lost in Afghanistan. It would mean increasing the probability that American troops would have to return at some later date to confront an enemy that is even more dangerous.
All of that has now come true. Your son lost his life there. What do you want to say to the president that made this decision? In other words, do they regret pulling out too early? Apparently not, based on what Josh Earnest said.
Well, and that's one of the things that I talked about and was very vocal about when they pulled everybody out, that we needed to leave troops there to stabilize that area. They weren't ready yet to take that over by themselves. And just like President Bush, I said that's the outcome. That's what we're going to see. That's what's going to be happening. Mark wrote an amazing last letter home. And I was speaking at an event today and read that again. He says it will take it longer than most think, but we will get Iraq to stand on its own feet. And I saw that. I went over in 2007, and then I went back in 2010. I saw the difference our troops had made. I saw the successes. And because we didn't leave troops there to stabilize, now it's in the hands of ISIS, and that's gut-wrenching to me to know the sacrifices that have been made there. We need to see our commander-in-chief allow our men and women who are the best military in the world to go in there and do what they do well and stabilize that country. And it's unconscionable to me. We heard from President Bush, who was a real commander-in-chief who loved his troops. And the man that is serving today, it's unbelievable that he doesn't allow our troops to do and give them policies and rules of engagement that let them be successful over there. It's unconscionable.
You were there. You knew Debbie Lee's son. You know, my question is, all these questions about Iraq to Republican candidates would be, knowing what you know now about the war in Iraq, would you have still pulled the troops out? I'd like Hillary and Obama to answer that question. What's your reaction to the fall of the city that you fought to liberate?
I was proud to serve alongside Mark. He was a great SEAL teammate and friend. And, you know, he sacrificed his life. We had two other guys, Mike Monsoor, Ryan Job, that sacrificed their lives, and so many other soldiers and Marines that fought bravely in those cities, hundreds wounded. We won. We won that war. The level of violence was radically lowered. And you know, unfortunately, I think my big issue here is it's not about numbers of troops that would have been left behind. It's about a failure of leadership. This is, we have a clear case here of leaders who do not understand.
You won the war, but we didn't secure the victory. Is that true?
That is true.
And if we would have left intelligence and training forces on the ground, would that victory still be secure today?
Under this leadership, I actually don't think so. I think that we have a president and senior commanders like General Dempsey who are not allowing our troops to actually go out and fight an evil enemy, as evil an enemy as the U.S. military has ever faced. And we absolutely could have prevented Ramadi from falling with a small number, maybe a couple of thousand troops on the ground, and some support from tanks and
now
aircraft.
They have all our military equipment. All right.
We could have dealt them a huge strategic blow, and instead we handed them a victory.
Thank you for your service. Thank you for being with us. Debbie Lee, I'm sorry about the loss of your son. It's unbelievable the way these events have unfolded. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Just remember Memorial Day and the sacrifices that have been made for our country.
Yes, ma'am. And while ISIS continues to seize Iraqi cities American troops died fighting for, President Obama could not have been more wrong when he said this back in 2011.
We're leaving behind a sovereign, stable, and self-reliant Iraq with a representative government that was elected by its people. We're building a new partnership between our nations. And we are ending a war, not with a final battle, but with a final march toward home.
Here with reaction is the host of War Stories, Colonel Oliver North. Colonel, you just heard from Debbie Lee, and you heard from Leif and his comments. They secured Ramadi, just like others secured Mosul, just like others secured Fallujah. And one by one, they keep falling into the hands of ISIS. Your reaction?
Well, the fall of Ramadi is a particularly bad, unmitigated disaster. It's going to result in a horrific bloodbath that's happening right now. At this moment, in the middle of the night, ISIS death squads are killing all the family members of any Iraqi soldier or policeman. Nearly all, by the way, of them are Sunnis. There are not 25,000 refugees. I'm told today that it's nearly 40,000 refugees from Ramadi and Fallujah, all down the Euphrates River Valley, stacked up on the western approaches to Baghdad without food, water, or protection. It is a genocide that is going to rival Bill Clinton's Rwandan genocide of 1994. And al-Abadi government in Baghdad is planning to retake Ramadi with the remnants of the Iraqi army and Iranian-equipped, trained, and led Shiite militias. My source says that ISIS is planning an attack on a Shiite holy city like Najaf or Karbala to distract the Iranian-controlled Shiite militias from going to Ramadi. Now, if ISIS takes Karbala, which is southwest of Baghdad, they're going to open up a new route direct to Baghdad. The Obama statement that they're going to help the Iraqi government retake Ramadi in the days ahead is a completely empty promise, Sean. The Iraqi army and police turned and ran from Ramadi this week, just like they abandoned Mosul and Tikrit last summer. And U.S. air power is impotent because of the way they're running about it.
Why are we sending our brave men and women?
Let me just finish this. Let me just finish this. They're bragging about 36 airstrikes in the last 3 weeks and 8 in the 12 hours during which Ramadi was falling. Get this. During Operation Iraqi Freedom, when I was on the air from Ramadi, we were running 800 to 1,000 airstrikes a day. So what's got to be done? They need to arm the Kurds and the Christian militia, which is being formed up north. Number 2, put more U.S. intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance overhead and more strike aircraft in the region. Number 3, put U.S. advisors, forward air controllers, and JTACs on the ground with Iraqi forces. Number 4, support the deployment of Egyptian, Saudi, Jordanian, and United Arab Emirates troops to Anbar province through Jordan all the way to Ramadi. And finally, you've got to target and kill the ISIS leadership. You can't just capture an accountant and grab his wife.
Do you think they're going to do that? You've laid out a plan for victory. I don't see it happening.
Well, you don't listen. With this administration, God knows what's going on. The fact is, you don't.
Would you want your son serving under this president right now with what has happened?
Careful, you know better.
Colonel, thank you. Appreciate it.
Bless you, brother.
Safe home. Joining us now with more reaction, author of the #1 New York Times bestselling book, Things That Matter, now out in paperback with a brand new section on the Obama years, Charles Krauthammer. Your take on the fall of Ramadi?
Well, you know, people talk about the immediate circumstances, of course, but Ramadi was lost when it was lost on January the 1st, 2012, when Obama decided to pull out entirely. And you showed that clip where he said Iraq is stable, self-reliant, and I think he was right. It was. And when you listen to General Petraeus, who won the war, at the end, he said himself in an interview about a month ago with the Washington Post that we had secured Iraq. It was still a fragile nation, but it was intact, and it had a future, and we had assets on the ground. We didn't have to maintain 100,000 troops, 200,000 troops. We just needed a residual force. And by leaving, we gave up not just the residual force. We gave up our influence over the government. We were the dominant influence in Iraq. We gave up our assets on the ground, our air bases, our control of airspace, and we gave up an unchallenged and unparalleled intelligence network that we had in Anbar. And it's precisely what we had and what we threw away. I wrote a column that's actually in the book. It's called Who Lost Iraq, which I wrote in December of 2011. And it ends by saying the future generations will ask not just, they're not going to ask who lost Iraq, that's known, they're going to ask why.
Charles, every Republican's being asked the question, you know, what you would have done, and now knowing what we know now, 2003, how would you have voted, et cetera. Isn't the question for the Democrats, knowing what you know now about Ramadi and Mosul and Fallujah and earlier Tikrit, would you have pulled out? When is that question going to be asked?
I wouldn't even ask it as a hypothetical. This is not, you know, this is not obscure knowledge that we couldn't have known. I and many others were arguing in December of 2011 that it was very clear that if we pulled out, they would be, the bad guys in the region would come in. You create a vacuum. And what's happened is Iraq is now being disputed between Shiite extremists, jihadists, meaning Iran on the one hand, and on the other hand, Sunni extremists and jihadists.
Unbelievable.
Just yesterday, the defense minister of Iran flew into Baghdad because they are now in charge.
All right, Charles Krauthammer, thank you. Very sad.
My
Coming
pleasure.
Up, a damning new report reveals Hillary Clinton used a second secret email address during her time at the State Department. Plus, tonight.
I have said repeatedly, I want those emails out. Nobody has a bigger interest in getting them released than I do.
Finally, after weeks of hiding, Hillary Clinton actually takes a couple of questions from the press, although that's not true. Columnist Mark Stein is here to explain the latest Clinton scandal. Plus, it's a busy night here on Hannity. Ann Coulter, Michelle Malkin, Jeff Foxworthy, all in studio. Straight ahead.